Hello, everybody. I hope you're having a great week this week. Today, I want to talk to you guys a little bit about Generation Z, the Zoomers. So, Generation Z, right now we've mostly got the generations Boomers, kind of the older ones. We've got Gen X. I came at the tail end of that one, the MTV generation, latchkey generation. Then we got the Millennials. Everybody knows about the Millennials. They're one of the bigger generations. And now we're seeing the Zoomers, or Gen Z, starting to kind of pop into the church as adults, or at least they're matriculating from the youth group into adults. And the big question now is, how do we engage those Zoomers? How do we interact with them? And I was looking at Carrie Nieuwhof's blog last week, and they had a really interesting article called The 7 Habits of Generation Z Your Church Might Be Ignoring. Now, I don't want to just rehash that article, but it's worth taking a look at if you get a chance. But what I do want to talk about is, how do we engage all of our generations that are online? And so that's predominantly going to be Gen X, the Millennials, and Gen Z. Now, Gen Z and the Millennials, they're digital natives. Gen X are digital immigrants. But they do generally kind of live there in the digital space as well, just not to the same extent as Millennials and not to the same extent as Generation Z. The way that you can kind of tell the difference is, did they actually grow up with computers and with digital technologies? Late Xers, a lot of them did, but kind of the earlier Xers probably not as much so. First off, I want to point out Gen Z is not that radically different per se from previous generations. In fact, I kind of joke that Gen Z is trying to be Gen X because, let's face it, like right now, the biggest movie in theaters is Top Gun. It's pretty much the same movie that we were watching when I was a kid. Same for like the Star Wars movies, were all rehashes of the original trilogy, which is again what we were watching as Gen Xers. I see them wearing a lot of the same fashion that we wore like in the 90s, and so yeah, I think that there's a certain amount of cyclical nature to some of these generations. But kidding aside, all the generations have generally been looking for purpose and looking to connect. I remember whenever I first started off in ministry, I got started off with young adults, and back then those were Gen Xers, and they were looking for and some early millennials, and they were looking for the same thing that every generation looks for, and that is purpose and meaning in life. And where do I fit in? Is there more to this? It was especially true because I started off really close to 9/11, and that was a big kind of earth-shaking thing for people born in that time. Now, first off, very first thing that we need to take into consideration is your church doesn't have unlimited resources per se. So yes, while Gen Z is going to be hanging out in TikTok mostly and even Snapchat, you probably don't have the resources to spend exclusively on trying to chase them on those platforms. And they're tricky platforms to use and to use well. So the first tip here is choose your social media channels carefully. Now, yeah, some of those older Xers are probably still on Facebook. Most of us that are younger, us on the younger end of Gen X, tend to kind of avoid Facebook. I do post a lot of my stuff to Facebook, but I don't really live in Facebook. Aside from when I'm having to post things, just repeats of content I put out, or some churches that are kind of in the older spectrum, we do post for those. But younger folks, the Zs are going to hang out a little bit on Instagram as well. Millennials are also on Instagram. The younger spectrum of the Gen Xers, you'll find some of them on Instagram. The challenge with Instagram is going to be that it's aspirational. So it's not a particularly relational platform in terms of people are kind of putting on a facade in the front. And I think that's a challenge for a church in a lot of ways, because you're going to be really tempted to put on a facade or a front yourself when you're on there. And if anything, everybody's really looking for something authentic, especially when it comes to faith and religion. And so I think you should not necessarily choose Instagram for your first platform. Yes, a lot of the people that you want to reach are probably going to be there, but I don't think it's going to be the one that you should do all your content primarily on. And so what it really leaves us with here is YouTube. And YouTube tends to transcend the generations. Everybody likes YouTube. Everybody uses YouTube. YouTube's been around since like 2005. That means a lot of the Xers and millennials were on it from pretty early on. Gen Z likes it. They frequent it quite a bit. And most everybody that they follow ends up there. And if you talk to even Christians that are Gen Z, millennials, things like that, yeah, they would be willing to go and check out the content of like their pastor or somebody if they were posting it on YouTube. So YouTube's going to be a good one to go with for your church. Now here's a quick tip. If you're going to get your church onto social media, don't just kind of do the whole if we build it, they will come, which is what I see a lot with churches. And so there'll be like a social media kind of presence, like there'll be a church account or like a Facebook page or something, and everybody will just assume, well, people will just like it and follow it, and that'll be that. I don't really think that's the way to do it, and I don't think theologically that's the right way to do it. Really, you should probably, as pastors, be setting up your personal accounts and actually going out there and friending people, following people that are in your congregation, in your ministries, and try to build out your network that way. You can also do this with your church's kind of official account, and you can follow people with that one. More so like if you have like an Instagram account or something, that makes sense. So jump on there and just go down the list and try to find your members and try to follow them. Especially if you're a smaller church, no reason not to. Most churches are below 100 people. You can definitely find the 80 or so adults. Some of them won't be on all the platforms, but just go out there and try to find them and follow them. And you'll find that they'll probably follow you back, and you'll have a lot better chance of engaging them and reaching out to them that way. Number 2, you need to understand the challenges of the digital native and address their anxieties. It's stressful being online all the time. We didn't have that when I was younger, because cell phones were really just kind of the realm of like traveling salespeople and drug dealers. Same with pagers, things like that. They weren't that common until I got into my 20s. But when it comes to like Zoomers on the younger end, this is something that they've had all the time. Most of the millennials as well have had smartphones this whole time. They're connected 24/7, and they're not going to disconnect. It's just not going to happen. Now, some of the things that they can run into can be these really toxic cultures and induce a lot of anxiety. Like I talk to a lot of even youth pastors, and I'll say, hey, I'll make a joke about like OnlyFans, and they'll be like, what's OnlyFans? I'll be like, dude, most of your kids are going to be or young adults even are going to be dealing with the problem of OnlyFans and simping. And they're like, well, what's simping? And so then I'll grab one of the kids from their youth group, or I'll say, hey, call up one of the kids from your youth group. We'll call them up, and I'll have them ask the questions. Hey, what's OnlyFans? What's simping? And they'll explain the whole thing to them. They'll explain all the challenges of it. They'll explain how their friends have gotten sucked into these things and the issues and challenges that they're facing because of it. So you make sure that you are aware of what people are living with and dealing with in kind of this online world that they have as digital natives. Another one, incels and black pills. That's one that you're going to end up wanting to address, in sermon series, in content, things like that. Flexing culture, that's cropped up quite a lot. So you'll see a lot of flexing. So yeah, get out there, put up some content on YouTube that addresses some of those things, and you'll find very quickly that your Zoomers and millennials and even your Gen Xers are going to respond quite a bit to this type of content, even just 5-minute videos. One that's going to probably be a bit challenging to talk about, but needs to be talked about, is going to be the politically charged issue of climate change. And as a church, as pastors, what we really need to do here is set aside the politics, focus in on facts, theology, and what does it mean to be an image bearer and be responsible for creation? What does it mean to seek to have human thriving. How do we approach these interests and these things? There's a lot of anxiety amongst young people. They think they're living under a perpetual Damocles sword, that it's an existential threat all the time. And literally there's a whole new booming therapy practice cropping up of therapists who focus on climate anxiety. And so it's easy to kind of brush these things off as, oh, maybe they're just being too sensitive, maybe they're too snowflake. It's a very big problem. Up to about 75%. That's 3 out of 4 Zoomers are very, very, very anxious and concerned, and believe that they're in an existential threat over climate change. And so this is something that you have to talk to your congregations about. You need to put out content for, in order to kind of meet them where they're at and be able to talk to them. I'm not going to tell you where you should land on these things. Again, deal with it theologically. Try to avoid dealing with it politically, but you do need to go out there and deal with it. Number 3, in a YouTube and Netflix world, people are going to need more than a sermon. I've alluded to this a few times, but let's face it. You've probably got a decent sermon. Probably no complaints there. It's they're not all going to be a home run, but they're probably okay. But is it really enough to just give people the weekly online live stream and have that be your entirety of your online content? Probably not. I mean, most of us, when we're facing a problem or an issue, we go to a search engine, we go to YouTube, we type in the question that we have, and we look for answers there. People are not going to find what they're looking for on your looking through your sermons, and that just means, hey, you have more opportunities to actually build better content, build other content than a sermon, to address other things. Like, you can still be doing your sermon, you can be doing, going through the whole book of Job, passage by passage. By the way, I don't like to go through Job passage by passage. I like to do it like just the whole book in one go. Otherwise, it's kind of weird. But that aside, if you're going through the Gospels, like passage by passage, section by section, you can still do that. You can do it exegetically. You can do all that. And then at other times of the week, you can put out a video, or, you can sit down with somebody in a podcast or whatever it is, and address other issues. You can address those issues of like OnlyFans and simping. You can address those incel and black pill issues. You can address, flex culture. You can jump in and deal with some of these things that your people are dealing with on more of a topical level, outside and beyond your sermons. Another thing that works really well is just behind the scenes stuff. Whether you're just talking to people as you're driving, or because those are surprisingly popular, where people just drive around in their cars and they've got the camera set up and they're just talking like you're driving with them in the car, or like I said, you can do vlog style stuff. You can talk to people while you're doing your hobbies, or like you can be baking a loaf of bread and sitting there talking about why you like baking, but also make it into teachable moments. I've worked with a lot of pastors over the years that were just phenomenal at doing these little teachable moments where they'd just be talking about something, be driving down the road, they'd see mountains and they'd start talking about the mountains and look at the goats and the way that the goats live on the mountains. And they'd be able to kind of start talking, they'd just segue right into scripture and some sort of thing. I'm not very good at it myself, but some of you guys are, and you may as well jump in and do some of that. Number 4, the smartphone is now the primary medium for everything. And this is really hard for older generations to comprehend, but the younger generations will actually go to their smartphone first to look for and find content. So, I mean, up to 75% to even 85% of their browsing is actually on their phone. Whether that's when they're stuck waiting for something. I mean, I see people doing this stuff on while they're waiting in line at the grocery store. They're sitting there, they're looking at stuff on their phone, they're playing games on their phone. Almost everything that they do is actually on their phone these days. And that means your church website, all your content, everything has to be keeping in mind a small screen format, right? So, don't be putting like massive blocks of text and things like that into your videos and things that people won't be able to actually read. Similar for images, things like that. Try to also make sure your website that it's responsive, that it'll format itself properly no matter how they hold up their phone, and that they'll be able to read everything, that they'll be able to interact with everything. If they want to register for a class, they need to be able to do it on their phone. You need to make everything that you do phone friendly. I've talked about this before, but don't do attachments in emails and things, because it's a pain to open up an attachment on your phone. People don't like to do that, and try to just avoid anything that would be kind of painful on a phone, because these younger generations are going to interact with you mostly on your phone. On the plus side, there's also a key opportunity here to send SMSs, because if you send someone an SMS, they'll almost always read it, and since they're pretty much glued to their phones, they will get it, they will see it, and they will most likely even open it and interact with it. All right, so number 5, start focusing content less on going to church and more on being the church. Now, as I've kind of pointed out before, every generation wants to be part of a movement. They want to be inspired, they want to find that purpose and that meaning. Now, while it can be really tempting, and I've seen churches kind of offer up Christianity as kind of self-help to these younger generations, you can actually, what you should actually be doing is just going straight gospel style, do it like Jesus, put the fork right there in the road and tell them, hey, if you're gonna follow Christ, it's gonna be tough, it's gonna be a challenge, you're gonna struggle. And the reason why is because, to a certain extent, these younger generations, especially the males, are actually looking for that. Like if you look at some of the popular podcasts and popular YouTubers and things, there's this weird outsized amount of popularity of guys like Jordan Peterson or Jocko Willink. And what they're doing is they're telling young guys, hey, make your bed. I mean, it's the most simple and basic thing. They're telling people you got to struggle, you got to put up with some of the stuff. So we tend to think of these younger generations sometimes in the church as, oh, they can't handle this stuff, we need to just focus in on them and this stuff. But actually, if we tell them, hey, guys, pull it together, here's what you got to do to pull it together. And the reason you need to pull it together is because, we're following Christ. It's important to do. It's going to be a challenge. You're going to overcome it. They'll do that. They will thrive in that environment. So yeah, focus more on that mission, focus more on letting people know that it is going to be a challenge, and sure, you will walk alongside with them through that challenge. There'll be community in it, but they are going to have to face down a challenge. Finally, number 6, be accessible and easily bookable. And this is a pet peeve of mine. For some reason, these days you can actually like book an appointment with your doctor while you're like waiting in some airport terminal in Abu Dhabi, on your phone. Hey, I want to make a doctor's appointment. And you can do that, right? You don't have to call them. You don't have to like go through gatekeepers, any of that. I will bet dollars and cents that your church probably doesn't allow me to book an appointment with your pastor online, like from the website or anything like that. Why is that? Right? Like if you're, I get that maybe it's very busy, things like that, but hey, the doctor's also really busy. So there has to be some way to easily connect with pastors and get that help. During 2020, something like, it was like 4% to 8% of millennials were actually contacted by a pastor. So there's just not nearly enough relational connection. And if these people are mostly living kind of in that online space, and online is where they go first for answers and first to try to get things done, they want to try to connect with you online. And that means being able to book you online from your church's website. You know, if there's like 100 people in your church, you're not actually going to get that many bookings. If you're like a super massive church, yeah, you're probably gonna have to share it amongst a pool of pastors to meet with. But still, you need to look at how can you do this and do it sustainably. If it's something that you hear that and you're just like, oh man, I already don't have time. I already can't do this. I can't pull it off. Well, that means that you need to start looking at your processes. You need to start rethinking, what are you doing? What things can you actually just get rid of and dump off of your schedule, off of your staff's schedule? Like, are you still doing the bulletin, like the old school paper bulletin? You just get rid of it. You know, are you doing a digital bulletin that's actual like pages and stuff like that? Get rid of it. Just leave a page on your website so that you don't have to deal with it, change it every single week. And you'd be surprised how much time you start to kind of get from doing these things. Are you fully using your church management system? I run into churches all the time that, you know, they're telling me, oh, I'm so busy, I can't get all these things done. And then you look at their church management system, they haven't used it at all. And it could have automated so much of the work that they were actually doing. So try to focus in. If you're too busy to be able to, you know, to be able to be bookable and accessible online, start looking at your processes, start trying to cut away those things that are kind of stealing away that time that you could be using to do discipleship with people, to help them with pastoral problems, things like that. Try to find those opportunities to open up for that. All right. Well, that is what I have for you guys this week. You know, if you're not sure where to start, just go ahead and open up that YouTube channel for your church. If your church already has a YouTube channel, which it probably does, stop posting the online sermons, you know, the whole live streams of the sermons. Instead, start posting up those 5-minute or so videos of issues that you know, Gen Z, millennials, those Gen Xers are probably facing. Like I said, start with something like OnlyFans and simping, and, you know, jump in with those incels and those black pills and the flex culture and stuff like that. And again, environmental issues, get in there. You're going to have to deal with them anyway at some point or another. They're inevitable. Just get in there and go ahead and throw those videos up there. Get some feedback on them. Let those younger folks tell you, like, hey, this was awful and we didn't like it, or hey, this was awesome and we loved it. And then ask them, hey, how can I make it better? How can I, you know, reach your friends? How or help you reach your friends? Things like that. All right, that is it for this week. I hope you guys have been having a great week, and I hope you guys have a great week upcoming. Along the sides here, you're going to see the links. Go ahead and like and subscribe. I think I'm supposed to actually tell people to do that at the beginning of these as well, that I'm supposed to tell people to like and subscribe, but I always forget to do that. But yeah, please like and subscribe, and I will see you guys next week.